You know, if anybody had told you a year ago that you would have been ... well, I just didn't think I was going to see this.
Robert Redford is known for his near-flawless career and carefully chosen roles, but even he has a few regrets. In 1980, he made a film that looked promising on paper, but turned into something he'd rather forget. And according to those close to him, it all had to do with her. So what really happened behind the scenes? And why does Redford still avoid talking about it? Join us as we dive into the untold story behind the movie Robert Redford wishes he never made. The making of Robert Redford. Robert Redford was born on August 18, 1936 in Santa Monica, California. His father was a milkman who later worked as an accountant, and his mother was a homemaker. Redford grew up in a working-class neighborhood and lived a fairly modest life in his early years. Although he was raised in sunny Southern California, his childhood wasn't all easy. He struggled with discipline in school and didn't always get along with authority figures. Teachers described him as intelligent but stubborn. He had a creative side even then, but he didn't always follow the rules. Redford's mother, who passed away when he was just a teenager, encouraged his artistic interests. Her death deeply affected him, and some say it helped shape the more serious and private personality he would develop as an adult. He felt different from others around him, even as a kid. This feeling stayed with him and later showed up in his work and the way he dealt with people in the film industry. He always wanted to do things his own way, and he was not afraid to stand his ground. In his early adulthood, Redford went through a bit of a rebellious phase. He briefly attended the University of Colorado, but dropped out due to poor grades and too much partying. After that, he traveled to Europe, then returned to the US and enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. There, he began to take acting seriously. He also studied painting at the Pratt Institute, but it was the stage that eventually drew him in. His first real success came on stage. In the early 1960s, Redford starred in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park on Broadway. The play was a hit, and Redford's performance earned him recognition. Audiences liked his charm, good looks, and natural style. This opened doors in television, where he appeared in various anthology series and dramas. He quickly gained a reputation for being thoughtful, reliable, and serious about his work. Redford's big break in film came in 1969, when he was cast as the Sundance Kid in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, alongside Paul Newman. This film made him a household name. The pairing with Newman was electric. Redford brought a cool, quiet intensity to the screen that balanced Newman's more playful energy. Viewers loved them together, and Hollywood took notice. Suddenly, Robert Redford was not just a rising star, he was a major force. Over the next few years, Redford solidified his place in Hollywood with a string of successful films. He starred in The Way We Were opposite Barbra Streisand, The Sting once again with Paul Newman, and All the President's Men, where he played journalist Bob Woodward. These roles showed his range and seriousness as an actor. At the same time, they also helped build the public image of Robert Redford as the golden boy of Hollywood, handsome, talented, and effortlessly charismatic. But behind that image was a man who was deeply focused on control. Redford was not just interested in acting. He wanted to be part of the creative process in every way. He paid close attention to scripts, characters, and even editing choices. He often gave feedback to directors and sometimes took it a step further. In some cases, Redford would re-edit scenes himself or suggest major changes that altered the final tone of a film. While some saw this as dedication, others saw it as controlling or overstepping boundaries. As Redford's fame grew, so did his influence. He became known for being highly selective about his roles and the people he worked with. He turned down many big films because he didn't believe in the story or didn't trust the team behind them. He wanted to work on projects that had meaning and purpose, not just box office appeal. This made him unique in Hollywood, where many actors were more focused on fame and fortune. However, Redford's perfectionism sometimes led to conflict. He clashed with producers who tried to rush him or change his vision. He didn't like to be told what to do, especially by people who didn't share his passion for storytelling. Some directors found him difficult because he had strong opinions and wasn't afraid to speak up. Co-stars who preferred a looser, more collaborative atmosphere sometimes found working with him frustrating. Redford liked structure and discipline on set, which didn't always match other actors' styles. Despite these challenges, Redford remained one of the most respected figures in the industry. His quiet confidence and sharp instincts helped him maintain control of his career, even when others tried to steer him in different directions. He also started directing, which gave him even more creative freedom. His first film as a director, Ordinary People, won him the Academy Award for Best Director. This proved that his attention to detail and strong will weren't just personality traits, they were part of his success. Redford's ability to balance public charm with private control is part of what made him so fascinating. He was never the loudest voice in the room, but he usually had the final say. People who worked with him often said they respected him, even if they didn't always agree with him. He wasn't interested in Hollywood politics or gossip. He wanted to make good films, on his own terms. Redford's rise to fame wasn't just about talent. It was about discipline, vision, and the quiet power of knowing what you want and sticking to it. He built his career carefully, avoiding scandals and protecting his privacy while staying fully involved in the work that mattered to him. But not everyone appreciated his style, and some of the biggest names in Hollywood had a hard time working with him. Love and Turmoil. Robert Redford has always been known as a private and thoughtful man. While much of the world saw him as a Hollywood icon, handsome, talented, and successful, his personal life told a more complex story. Redford has been married twice, and both relationships show different sides of him. His first marriage lasted almost 3 decades, but was marked by growing distance and emotional strain. His second marriage, much later in life, seemed more peaceful and steady. Looking at these 2 marriages helps us understand Redford not just as an actor, but as a person who often struggled to balance love, fame, and his need for independence. Redford married his first wife, Lola Van Wagenen, in 1958. At the time, he was a young and struggling actor, still trying to find his place in the world. Lola was a Mormon from Utah with a strong sense of family and stability. She believed in him, supported his dreams, and stood by his side while he worked hard to build his career. The early years of their marriage were filled with hope and the kind of support that many artists need when starting out. They had 4 children together, although one of them died as an infant, a tragedy that deeply affected them both. During this time, Redford wasn't yet the famous actor everyone knew. He was taking small roles, working on stage, and slowly gaining attention in the entertainment world. Lola handled much of the home life, raising the children and giving Redford the space to focus on his work. It seemed like a good partnership. She was his foundation, and he was building something big. But things began to change as Redford's fame grew in the late 1960s and early 1970s. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid made him a major star in 1969, everything about his life shifted. Suddenly, he was being pulled in many directions: film sets, media attention, social events, and new opportunities. While Lola continued to stay out of the spotlight, Redford became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The pressure of fame created space between them. Redford became more focused on his work. He was known for being extremely dedicated to every project. Whether he was acting, directing, or producing, he gave it everything. This level of focus often meant long hours and long stretches away from home. Lola, who had once been his emotional support, started to feel more like a background figure in his busy life. They grew apart emotionally, even though they remained married for years. There were also rumors of Redford being unfaithful. While he rarely addressed these claims publicly, some people close to him suggested that the fame, constant travel, and temptation of Hollywood made it difficult to stay fully committed. At the same time, Redford became more emotionally closed off. He was already a private man, but during these years, he became even more guarded. He didn't enjoy discussing personal matters, even with those close to him. Lola reportedly felt this distance, and it eventually took a toll on their relationship. In 1985, after 27 years of marriage, Redford and Lola divorced. The split was quiet and respectful, without any public drama. Redford continued to protect his privacy, and Lola moved on to focus on her own work in environmental and historical research. Though they had shared many years and raised a family together, the marriage had reached a point where both needed different things. Years later, Redford found love again, but in a much different way. In the mid-1990s, he met Sybil Zaggers, a German-born artist who shared his interest in nature and creative expression. Their relationship began quietly and slowly. Unlike the fast-paced life he had lived during his earlier years, this time Redford took things at his own pace. They lived together for over 2 decades before getting married in 2018. Sybil was not part of the Hollywood world, and that seemed to suit Redford perfectly. She was calm, artistic, and had her own career as a painter. Their relationship was based more on mutual respect, shared values, and a slower lifestyle. By this point in his life, Redford had stepped back from the public eye. He was choosing projects more carefully, spending time at his ranch in Utah, and focusing on environmental causes. Sybil supported this life, and together they built a peaceful routine that gave Redford the privacy he always wanted. Many people noticed that Redford seemed more at ease in this second partnership. There was less pressure, less public attention, and more emotional balance. While his first marriage was filled with the energy and ambition of a man building his career, his second marriage reflected a man who had already achieved his goals and now wanted peace. Sybil provided that, and their relationship has remained strong and stable. But while his personal life found some peace later on, not all of his professional relationships were so smooth, and some of his most intense clashes were with the biggest stars in Hollywood. Paul Newman versus Redford. Robert Redford and Paul Newman created one of Hollywood's most beloved on-screen partnerships. Their chemistry in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was natural, charming, and full of energy. Audiences loved watching them play off each other, the relaxed, confident Newman next to the quieter, more serious Redford. They were different types of actors, but together, they worked perfectly. Their friendship seemed effortless on screen, and the success of the film turned them into one of the most iconic duos in movie history. A few years later, they teamed up again for The Sting, which was another massive hit. It won multiple Academy Awards and further proved that Redford and Newman had something special. Fans and critics assumed the two were close in real life, and for a while they were. They shared a genuine respect for each other and enjoyed their early time working together. They even played pranks on each other during filming and laughed about their different approaches to acting. On the surface, everything looked solid, but behind the scenes, there were early signs of tension. As Redford's fame started to rise, he became more protective of his image and more involved in the creative side of filmmaking. He didn't just want to act, he wanted a say in how things were done. Newman, on the other hand, was already a major star by the 1960s and had been used to leading roles and top billing. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid came out, there was a quiet disagreement over whose name should appear first in the credits. Newman got top billing, but Redford's performance helped elevate the film, and many believed he deserved equal credit. That moment marked the beginning of a competitive dynamic between the two. As Redford moved into the 1970s, his interest in directing and creative control only grew stronger. He wanted more than just acting roles. He was interested in shaping the full story, not just playing a part in it. Newman, however, had always been the main figure in his projects. He was confident, experienced, and used to being the leader. The difference in how they saw their roles in Hollywood started to create some quiet distance between them. Although there was no public falling out, Redford and Newman worked together less and less. They didn't reunite for another film, even though fans hoped they would. Behind closed doors, their relationship became more formal. They still spoke highly of each other in interviews, and there was mutual admiration, but they didn't spend time together the way they had during their earlier years. Redford once admitted that they drifted apart as life and work took them in different directions. Later in life, Redford honored Newman after his death in 2008, calling him a great friend and a brilliant actor. It was clear the respect never faded, but the closeness they once had slowly turned into a more distant, respectful connection. Their partnership gave the world 2 unforgettable films, but the friendship itself didn't last in the same way. Next, we'll take a look at Redford's much sharper feud with a very different kind of co-star, Jack Nicholson. Feud with Jack Nicholson. In the 1970s, Robert Redford and Jack Nicholson were 2 of the biggest names in Hollywood. Both were leading men, but they couldn't have been more different. Redford was known for being calm, polished, and in control. Nicholson was loud, wild, and unpredictable. While they were never open enemies, there was clear tension between them. Their personalities, acting styles, and views on filmmaking clashed behind the scenes. The result was a quiet rivalry that lasted for years. One major moment that showed their competition came in the early 1970s when both actors were considered for the lead role in The Great Gatsby. The film was based on the famous novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the role of Jay Gatsby was a highly sought-after part. Redford got the role in the end, but Nicholson was also seriously considered. According to some reports, Nicholson was frustrated by losing the role to Redford, whom he saw as too stiff or unemotional for the part. This only added to the growing distance between them. Redford, on the other hand, didn't think highly of Nicholson's behavior on and off the set. Redford preferred a professional, focused environment. He liked to rehearse, prepare, and stick to the plan. He didn't enjoy surprises on set, and he expected others to be just as serious. Nicholson had a completely different approach. He thrived in chaos. He liked to improvise, change lines, and shift the energy of a scene without warning. To some directors, this made him exciting and fresh, but to Redford, it felt messy and out of control. It didn't help that Nicholson often made harsh comments behind the scenes. While the two actors never worked directly together in a major film, those close to Nicholson say he once called Redford wooden in private conversations. He didn't think Redford's style showed much emotional range, and he often made jokes about Redford's quiet, serious image. These comments got around, and though Redford didn't respond publicly, he was known to keep his distance from actors who disrespected him, even quietly. The truth is, Redford and Nicholson represented two very different types of actors during the same era. Redford worked best in structured films where everything was carefully planned. He valued precision and subtlety. Nicholson liked chaos, emotion, and freedom. His biggest roles, like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The Shining, were intense and sometimes wild. For Redford, that kind of energy was hard to be around. Directors and producers often picked one or the other for projects, depending on the tone they wanted. Redford was the quiet force with charm and depth. Nicholson was the bold spark with unpredictability. These differences made it unlikely they would ever work well together, and in the end, they never did. The two remained distant figures in each other's careers, often circling the same roles and projects but never landing on the same set. Redford may have avoided direct conflict, but he was not afraid to walk away from actors he couldn't work with, and that included Nicholson. Next up, we'll dig into Redford's silent standoff with another intense actor, Gene Hackman. Robert Redford and Gene Hackman. Robert Redford and Gene Hackman were two of the most respected actors of their generation. Both were serious, talented, and highly dedicated to their work. But when it came to personality and values, they couldn't have been more different. While they shared the same era and often received similar praise, they never worked together on a major project. That wasn't by accident. It came down to a basic personality clash and a mutual lack of interest in dealing with each other. Redford, known for his calm and quiet presence, often kept a professional distance on set. He didn't show strong emotion in his personal relationships or in his acting style. Hackman, on the other hand, brought a kind of raw intensity to every role he played. He had a strong, sometimes aggressive energy that made his performances powerful but could also make him hard to work with. Redford reportedly found Hackman's intensity a bit too much. He thought Hackman could be abrasive and unpredictable, both on and off camera. Hackman didn't think much of Redford either. He often criticized what he saw as the fake charm of Hollywood's elite. Hackman came from a working-class background and took pride in his rougher, more grounded image. He didn't trust actors who seemed too polished or too concerned with status. In interviews, Hackman never called Redford out directly, but people close to him said he viewed Redford as distant, maybe even arrogant. He once described certain actors as being cold and controlling, and it was widely believed that Redford was one of the people he had in mind. The two had chances to work together over the years. Redford reportedly offered Hackman roles in a few of his own directing projects, including A River Runs Through It and Quiz Show. Hackman turned them down. He didn't feel comfortable working under Redford's leadership and didn't like the tone of the projects. Hackman preferred gritty, emotionally intense roles, while Redford's films often leaned toward quiet, thoughtful storytelling. Their tastes didn't match, and their working styles were simply too different. Hackman also had a strong dislike for what he called the Hollywood elite. He didn't enjoy award shows, networking, or public appearances. Redford, although more private than most stars, was still a major figure in Hollywood circles. He had his own film festival, had won Oscars, and had close ties to powerful people in the industry. Hackman thought all of that felt out of touch and artificial. For him, Redford was the symbol of an industry he didn't want to fully be a part of. Despite all this, there was never a public argument between them. Redford rarely commented on Hackman, and Hackman stayed mostly silent as well. But those in the industry knew that the two didn't mix. They respected each other's work from a distance, but they had no interest in working together. It wasn't about one event or one disagreement. It was simply a case of two strong-minded people who didn't connect. The 1980 film He Regrets. Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand shared one of the most iconic romantic pairings in film history. But behind the scenes of The Way We Were, their working relationship was far from warm. The movie told the story of two opposites, a political activist and a laid-back writer, falling in and out of love. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable. Off-screen, however, things were tense, cold, and complicated. Their professional clash was not explosive in a dramatic way, but it was deep and long-lasting. It left a mark on both of them and explained why they never worked together again, despite public demand for a reunion. Redford was not the first choice for the role of Hubbell Gardner. Barbra Streisand, who was already heavily involved in the development of the film, wanted him from the beginning. She believed Redford was the only actor who could match her on screen and make the love story feel authentic. But Redford wasn't immediately interested. In fact, he was hesitant. He worried that the film would become too centered on Streisand, who was known not only for her talent, but also for her strong personality and control over her projects. Redford didn't want to be seen as a secondary character in a film that felt like it might be a vanity project. Eventually, he agreed to take the role, but only after certain conditions were met. One of those conditions, according to some reports, was that parts of the script be revised. Redford didn't think the character of Hubbell was fully developed. He wanted more depth, more screen time, and a stronger emotional arc. It's said that he worked with writer Arthur Lawrence to rewrite several scenes so the story felt more balanced between the two characters. Streisand agreed, at least publicly, but the foundation for tension was already there. During filming, the divide between their approaches became even more obvious. Streisand poured herself into the role, often pushing for more emotional scenes and dramatic moments. She liked to improvise lines and try different emotional tones during takes. Redford, by contrast, preferred to stick to the script. He liked control and subtlety. He didn't enjoy doing scenes over and over with different emotional extremes. To him, the strength of the film came from its quiet, understated parts, not from emotional outbursts or grand performances. This difference in style led to friction. Redford reportedly found Streisand exhausting to work with. He admired her talent, but he disliked how much control she tried to have over the film. He thought she could be self-absorbed and demanding. Streisand, in turn, thought Redford was too distant and cold. She said he often shut her out and didn't engage with her in emotional scenes the way she hoped he would. Their communication was limited, and their connection off-screen was minimal. People who worked on the film described their relationship as cordial at best and brittle at worst. They were not openly hostile, but there was no warmth between them. They stayed professional, hit their marks, and delivered strong performances, but there was no friendship behind the camera. Their only real connection seemed to happen when the cameras were rolling. As soon as the scene was over, they went their separate ways. Despite all this, The Way We Were became a huge success. Audiences loved the film, and many believed the emotional tension they saw on screen was the result of deep personal chemistry. In reality, it was the result of two strong-willed professionals who were barely able to work together, but pushed through to deliver a film that resonated with people around the world. Refusal to reunite. After the success of The Way We Were in 1973, many people expected Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford to reunite for another film. Their on-screen chemistry was unforgettable, and audiences were eager to see them together again. For Streisand, it wasn't just about public demand. She truly believed that the magic they had created could happen again. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, she pushed for a sequel to The Way We Were, or for a new romantic project with Redford. She felt there was more story to tell and more emotional ground to explore between their characters or in a different setting. Streisand actively tried to get Redford on board. She worked with writers, pitched ideas, and even tried to rework a few scripts to fit both of their strengths. But every time she reached out, Redford declined. He never gave harsh rejections, but he made it clear that he wasn't interested. In several interviews over the years, Redford gave the same response: one film was enough. It wasn't personal, he insisted. He simply felt the original film said everything it needed to say. To Streisand, though, it was personal. She had poured so much of herself into The Way We Were, both the performance and the behind-the-scenes development. She felt a deep emotional connection to the story and to Redford's character. His refusal to work with her again hurt her, and she later admitted it. In a 2016 interview, Streisand said she was disappointed and wounded by his unwillingness to reunite. She admitted she never really understood what went wrong. To her, the partnership had worked beautifully. Redford, on the other hand, saw the experience very differently. He found working with Streisand exhausting. While he respected her talent and her dedication, he felt overwhelmed by her emotional intensity. He said in interviews that he didn't want to go through that experience again. Redford was a private person, someone who valued calm control and quiet focus on set. Streisand brought emotion, spontaneity, and a very strong presence. That made their film great, but it made their working relationship extremely difficult. Despite all the tension, both Streisand and Redford always spoke respectfully about each other's work. They never bad-mouthed each other in public. Streisand often praised Redford's acting ability, calling him perfect for the role of Hubble and incredibly natural. Redford in turn called Streisand gifted and said she brought powerful emotion to the screen. Professionally, they admired one another, but that respect came with clear emotional boundaries. If you enjoyed this look into the real drama behind the screen, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age.